Hi, I'm Mark Cunningham with Grace Property Management. So if you've been a landlord for any period of time, you've had your tenant call and report something that needs to be fixed, something that's broken. And sometimes they'll say something like this, you know, if you want, I can just go ahead and repair that for you, and then I'll just deduct it from my rent. And it's kind of tempting, isn't it? Because you think, well, gosh, it saves me having to send somebody out there, having to go do it myself. Should I just let my tenant do that issue, that item, and deduct it from my rent? And it's never a clear-cut answer. Generally speaking, for most things, probably not, but it's not always. And there's two questions you want to ask yourself to determine if you should let your tenant do the repair or not. Question number one is, what is the liability level to the tenant? Is the tenant going to hurt themselves doing this thing? So for example, we had a tenant that it was something as minor as changing the smoke batteries in a smoke detector. However, the smoke detector was on a ceiling. It was one of those crazy high ceilings. It was like 25 feet up in the air. So the tenant would have to go get a ladder 25 feet up. Do you want your tenant climbing a ladder 25 feet in the air to change batteries, reaching up high to change the batteries? What happens if they fall? Who's going to get sued? You are. Who's going to lose? You are. So maybe in that situation you don't. It's a high liability. Do you want your tenant replacing the hot water heater? Probably not. Why? It's a high liability to them. If they do something wrong, they could hurt themselves. So we don't want that. Now the second question to ask is, what's the liability to the property? If they do this wrong, is this going to damage my property, or is this just a minor thing that really doesn't matter? So if the tenant says, hey, my kitchen sink is leaking, I think it just needs a new aerator. Well, great, have them go buy the $2 aerator and screw it on. Doesn't hurt them, there's no liability to them, and there's no liability to the property. If it doesn't work, it's still dripping. But that's an issue. So let's look at a couple different examples of things that we want to put through those two filters. Number one, sprinkler system turnoffs. Winter's coming, the sprinkler system needs to be winterized to make sure it doesn't freeze. So do we let the tenant do that winterization? Well, is there any liability to the tenant? Are they going to hurt themselves winterizing the sprinkler system? Probably not. You can't really hurt yourself. How about to the property? Could that damage or cause liability to the property if they don't do it properly? You bet it will. You could have broken lines, things breaking, freezing, popping up, and have thousands of dollars of repairs. So on sprinkler systems, no. We would not want the tenants winterizing the sprinkler system, even if they say they know how, because if they do it wrong, you could have thousands of dollars worth of damage. Number two, what about changing furnace filters? That's no liability to the tenant, right? You're typically sliding a little metal door open, pulling out a dirty filter, putting in a clean one. No liability to the tenant. Is there liability to the property? Now this is a kind of a tricky one, because if they never get changed, it could be some liability to the property. It could cause the life of your furnace to be reduced. So this is kind of a tricky one, but if you can ensure that the tenant will get it done, then by all means, have them do them. Give them the furnace filters, but you need to follow up to make sure they got it done. Don't just assume they're going to get it done. Confirm they got it done. If you can't confirm they got it done, then it probably is worth you going out there, changing out that filter yourself. What about cleaning gutters? This comes up from time to time. Hey, the gutters, tenant calls, or owner says, hey, I want the gutters cleaned on the property. Can the tenant just do it? Can we write that into the lease that the tenant must clean the gutters? Well, is there liability to the property itself if the gutters aren't cleaned? Yeah, potentially, right? It can cause the gutters to break or things to flow over the edge, so a little bit of there. How about liability to the tenant? Have you ever been up on a tall ladder cleaning your gutters and slipped? A lot of people have. So there's a high degree of liability to the tenants if you have them cleaning their own gutters. So that is not something we would want the tenant to be doing. Now, this is not an exact science, but you need to decide based upon Colorado state law, based upon your lease agreement, based upon how much liability you want you to take on yourself and how much protection you want to give to your tenant, what things you want to be doing on behalf and what things you want your tenant to be doing. One last thing. In Colorado, can tenants do repairs themselves and deduct that cost if the landlord does not repair? So let's say your tenant calls you and says, hey, I need to have my stove fixed because it's not working, and you just don't do it. You as a landlord, for whatever reason, say, no, I'm not going to do it. Can the tenant get that done and legally deduct it from their rent? And is that okay legally? Well, the answer is sometimes they can. Colorado state law has some carve-out provisions on specific types of required repairs that if you as a landlord do not do it in a certain amount of time, by all means, the tenant legally can have it done and can legally withhold the cost of that from their rent and just pay the balance. Now, there's a lot of hoops to jump through and some intricacies of that law, some do's and don'ts. It's not real straightforward. It's a little bit complicated. But know that as a landlord, tenants have this ability. Another reason that you better be taking good care of your property, taking good care of your tenants, and when appropriate, maybe let them do that, changing the aerator, changing the furnace filters. But more times than not, you want to be making sure that you're doing the repair to ensure that there's no liability to the tenant and that your property is properly protected. If you have questions on this, feel free to reach out to our office. We're happy to be a reference. Rentgrace.com is our website. Happy to help if we can.